All right, this is part 3 of one of the new additions to the herd. This Vixen. Sorry, I've still got this freaking sinus and cold thing, so it sounds like I'm sniffling all the time. So anyways, I brought this car home. I don't know, I think it was Saturday or Sunday night, and this is a car I gave to my buddy, I don't know, probably about a year ago, maybe, and I was starting it out as making a street legal post-apocalyptic car that I could take out to Wasteland Weekend. I could actually drive there if I wanted to. It started out as a 2008, well, it still is, but started out as a 2008 Ford Crown Victoria Police Interceptor from Sacramento Police Department. I don't remember if it was Sheriff's Office or what, but it had been in a accident where it was either responding code 3 or was in a chase or something, and it spun around backwards with a driver and a passenger in it. I'd like to see him do that with just a passenger in it. I guess if you don't wear your seatbelt, you could end up as a passenger. So it spun out backwards, hit a curb. When I got the car, this rim was folded almost in half. So my buddy made that into a barbecue, or like a potbelly stove with a couple of Taurus rims that were bent. So it had a bent rim. If you notice the rear end, I don't know if you can tell, but the trunk lid on a Crown Vic is normally completely flat. The whole back end just flattens out, if not has a downward taper or slope. Well, the whole car is folded in the back up in a way, because when it spun out, it went backwards, hit a curb, got airborne, went off a ravine through a chain link fence. The chain link fence wrapped around it, maybe slowed its travel, I don't know. The car ended up landing nose up, so basically like this, in a pine forest. The pine trees were all around it. It slid down the trunks of a couple of trees, and his branches got stripped off on its way down to the ground. This spotlight got torn off. This was just a nub. There was no mirror here. This window was busted. This door has a hole in it, and actually you can almost reach inside. You can see the daylight on the ground. That's coming through the car. This damage happened here. The rear window was punched out, and one of the big branches that came through the back of the car as it was traveling backwards and vertically downward came through the car. Oh, I can't open these doors because they lock from here. Anyways, there's a tear in the back of the passenger front seat where a branch went through the car and actually ended up impaling the passenger side officer. So here's my little unlock for the back doors, and I don't have my flash on, so maybe we'll be able to see it, maybe we won't. I need to tighten these seats down. But there's a hole right here, and luckily this was a police car and not a standard car, because they have what's called a stab-proof seat. So one branch hit here and here in the stab-proof seat, so it can't get through. The other, there was actually a tear in the original headrest here, and there was blood. I don't know if you can see the marks anymore, but this seat, you see that kind of reddish orange? This this seat was black with dried blood, and there was dried blood up there on the base of the windshield, and there's probably a bunch of blood in the dashboard. So, needless to say, this car went through quite the ordeal, and it didn't stop there. The car was left vertical after both the drivers were rescued. Not drivers, but driver and passenger. I don't know if the driver got hurt. I would assume he got shook up. So the car got left in the forest, pointing straight up like this, I think for a week or so, because they had to go through and cut the trees down just to get the car out of the forest. So when I went to go buy the car, I was told it doesn't run, it's salvage title, never be on the road again, selling it just for parts. And I literally bought it alone for the ashtrays, because police cars, if anybody buys and sells police cars or has bought police cars just for personal use, you learn very quickly that they do not have ashtrays or cigarette lighters in them anymore, because the place where the ashtray and the cigarette lighter was has one of these consoles in it, and they jump power to the console, and then it has its own appropriate cigarette lighter plug. Well, it's not a cigarette lighter plug, it's a power port, but they don't need a cigarette lighter in a police car. So I saw in the pictures on the website for the auction that there was like 6 or 7 ashtray assemblies with cup holders, just all the stuff that's missing at the front of the dash. So I literally bought the car for 1 spotlight, 3 wheels, maybe the transmission, if the transmission was any good. But yeah, this area here where this little dude is, that's where the ashtray and cigarette lighter and cup holders go. So I was like, I think I got the car for like $350 or $450, and it was 2008. And I know it was running at the time of the accident, and it did have some high mileage on it. More than likely, the reason it was in the car chase and the reason that it got wrecked so badly is because whenever there is a car chase, if there's any cars on duty that have an excess of miles or are older models, then they usually end up being commandeered to assist in a car chase, especially if there's any pit maneuvers involved. Because nobody wants to take a brand new patrol car and ruin it in a pit maneuver, which is usually causes quite a bit of damage to a car. Even though Crown Vics are rebuildable, if they happen to have any of these Tauruses on the force at the time, or Explorers, or even the Excursions, which I learned not too long ago from another guy's video, that the Ford Excursions that you see out there in the police department are not actually pursuit certified, which means that they don't go through the rigorous testing to be certified to be in pursuit. So I'm sure you could use one for a pit maneuver in a lower speed situation, somewhere under 80 miles an hour. You could probably chase somebody for a little bit, but that's why you don't see Excursions and a lot of car chases on Night Witness News, because they're actually not certified for the chases. Now, these Crown Vics, I've said it before and I'll say it again, if you want a car with all the tricks, you need to go with the Crown Vics, because these cars are strong, They're reliable, they're heavy, and they're built like a truck. So if there was ever a car made for a pit maneuver, if there was ever a car designed for a pit maneuver, if a car could ever be certified for pit maneuvers, the Crown Vics are it. So who knows, because some of the damage that was on it before we started converting it over to a Mad Max car might have been just from the initial parts of a pit maneuver, or they were sent to assist to a possible pit maneuver, because the car, I got it, I think, with 120,000 miles, which I usually don't buy these cars for resale with much more than 100,000 miles. Some people, they don't care how many miles are on them. They're going to rebuild them, put them back together, and maybe get them for a couple $100 and sell them for a couple $1,000. Me, I like to buy a car for maybe between $800 to $2,500 and double my money. I've gotten $4,000 or $5,000 for a $2,000 car. That's just the way I was doing it. Oh, that's just disgusting. So anyways, sorry, I've got a cold or a flu or some sinus thing, so bear with me. So long story short, this car was wrecked, left out in the woods, finally recovered and brought back to Sacramento surplus agency that has a huge dickhead running it, and I had to deal with him before, and I'm never going to deal with him again. We'll say why maybe some other time. But I knew I was getting an engine, a new alternator. I can identify a lot of stuff on these cars. I've dealt with a lot of them. I bought a lot of them. I've sold a lot of them. And there's a bunch of parts I could use. So I showed up, went to crank it. They said, oh, it doesn't run. So I said, okay. So went to crank it. The battery was dead. Hooked my jumper cables to it, cranked it, didn't start. So before even doing anything else, I was able to pry the trunk lid open enough to reach inside and push the reset the inertia switch, which was tripped. Sat in the car and first crank, things started right up. It ran fine, it cleared out, smoothed out. It was really cold that morning. I got video of it. And it steamed, and a little bit of oil smoke come out of it, probably because the car was sitting vertical, so all the oil in the engine probably settled up in the valve train valley on the top of the cylinder heads and probably weeped into the rearward cylinders. And luckily it had been sitting long enough that it didn't hydrolock, because if they tried to start it right after they'd gotten it back down horizontal, I'm pretty sure it would have had bent valves or broken rods. So lo and behold, it runs. And another thing that I can always, almost always, expect to find in the trunk of a police car is a brand new spare. Because there is no cop I've ever known that has ever pulled over on the side of the road with a flat and changed it himself. It's getting towed. Maybe they're bringing a spare tire out, or maybe they're pulling the spare tire out of the trunk to put on the ground with fleet services. But police car gets a flat tire, it gets put in a tow truck, and it gets taken back to the shop. And if any of the tires have any issues whatsoever, especially the one with a hole in it, they do not plug emergency tires on emergency vehicles. So that being said, the spare tire in the back of a police car, I don't care how old it is, if it's coming directly from a department, 9.8 chances out of 10 it's going to have a brand new spare on a brand new rim. It's never touched the ground. So I worked and pried on the trunk a little bit more, got it open, and lo and behold, there's a brand new spare tire. Jack up the car, put the tire on it. I drive it to the front of the parking lot in Fleet Services, and one of the guys sees it running. He's all like, how the hell did you get that running? I go, magic, my son, magic. Had a little bit of pixie dust left over in a Ziploc bag, and I just sprinkled it over the engine, and voila. We got a running, driving police interceptor to take home. So fast forward to about a year ago, I was working on building a street legal Mad Max car to replace Charlotte. Not necessarily to replace her so much as to have something that a lot of people don't have, which is there's some people out there, and you guys know who you are, that have Mad Max cars that people go, oh my God, what happened? Or, oh my God, that's the coolest thing I've ever seen in my life. So I have one that gets both rave reviews, negative and positive, and I take it out the Wasteland weekend. I have a blast, I have a ball, everybody wants to look at it. Once in a great while, a really pretty girl wants to jump on top of it and get some pictures taken. Not to mention they want to get on the car too to get pictures taken. So anyways, so I start building the car. I have this sinus thing I have about every year. I actually got sick enough that they put me on prednisone, which damn near killed me because they put me on prednisone for a sinus infection. So if anybody ever wants to put you on prednisone for sinusitis, make sure that you don't have any ill side effects to be anticipated from prednisone, because it's usually used for cancers and excessive white blood cell count from things that your body's fighting. So what that evolved into is me giving up on trying to do any more work on the car, because I think all I got accomplished was flaring out the fenders to put bigger tires on. And I think I, at that point, put I think it's called a dub lift. I don't know what they call it, but these people back east that have all these Monte Carlos, El Caminos, Camaros, Crown Vics, Mercuries, that they put big, huge wheels and tires on them just to show off. So I looked up online. I found a literal suspension lift kit to give me a 3-inch lift on the whole car. I started doing it on the front. I was just tired. I was exhausted. It was too much work for me. I had other things going on. My buddy didn't have a Mad Max car. He wanted to do one. He loved the attention that we got. And with all the gear he would wear to be in character for the event, he never was really inside Charlotte, which is the 1968, a 40-year senior of this car, which is outside. He just sat on the deck lid in the back because there was no windows in it, and he was just kind of an extra secret weapon. And so I said, hey, you know what? I could sell this car. I could part it out. I can't rebuild it to make it a sellable, safe car. It's salvaged and it's bent. Still drives fine, runs fine, air conditioner, heat, everything works. But it's just not a viable moneymaker. So do you want it? And he kind of thought about it and ran it across his wife. And of course, she thought she was crazy, of course. Yes, I repeat words a lot. Watch my documentary. I say, I think affectionately about 1,700 times during a 15-minute interview. But so he takes the car and he makes it what it is today, which is pretty frickin' badass. And street legal, no doubt. So I've driven on the street plenty of times. I don't think he ever actually drove it on the street since he owned it, which is understandable. It's going to attract the wrong type of attention no matter where you go, even places it belongs. When I went out to the event for the 10th anniversary, first time this car got to go out, because last year I was sick. We couldn't go to the event for the 9th year. So he'd already had almost all this done, and this car is just sitting. So, you know, he had it all ready to dressed and no place to go. So last minute this year, I was sick again. I started feeling better, and I said, you know what? We need to go to the event. My buddy needs to take this car out and let it shred its stuff, because I just think this thing is right up anybody's wheelhouse out there and will fit right in, or maybe not fit in. Maybe just be, maybe it could win one of the car shows or something. My car's never won any of the car shows at the event. It's just one honorable mention and just bragging rights in LA Weekly and a couple other news syndicates that say, it's been in the top 10 post-apocalyptic cars or badass cars of all time in the wasteland. So we went out to the event. We had fun. The wind was only at about 50 or 60 miles an hour, so, it was good weather. But we ended up driving the cars around. He ended up pushing my car around. We kind of had our little bumper to bumpers demolition derby per se when somebody saw him behind me, and I'd pull up in Charlotte and Vixen would be behind me and, hey, there's a cop behind you. So I'd throw it in reverse and just back into him. And when Charlotte would overheat, because she does have some issues, she is a hot-blooded redhead, and let me tell you, she gets a little warm out there sometimes, and I have to shut her down. And if it's not in an opportune place to park, well, I got my push car here, so we just use Vixen to push Charlotte back to camp or get out of the way of traffic, go walk around for a while, see the sights, buy some wares, come back and jump in the cars, and Charlotte will start right up and go again as long as she has a chance to cool off. So lo and behold, while we were out there, I guess from what I heard, from what Eldorado said, which is my buddy's, we'll call a screen name or post name out there, people just, I don't know, they're kind of critical out there. Most of the time they're just talking shit. I actually believe that just about 90% of the negative feedback you get out there is literally just somebody pulling your chain and screwing with you, because the hi, how you doing out there is fuck you, fuck off, and eat shit. That's the way they talk to you if they like you. So it's kind of a funny deal. You can never tell whether you're supposed to be there with what you have or not, because nobody's going to say, hey, how you doing, have a nice day, because that's actually translated to, I actually don't like you, fuck off, and get away from me. And we got a lot of F you, fuck the police, look at the crown dick, and I literally thought it was compliments, and I know in my heart they were. But, Lee, did I say his name? Leroy? So Eldorado was like, you know what? I want something that's mine. I want something that embodies what I see as a badass post-apocalyptic survivor bug-out vehicle. And I've always wanted four-wheel drive on Charlotte, and the only thing I could do would be to a lot of fabrication, throw a Dana 44 in the front, and a transfer case, and some drive shafts, and yada, yada, yada. Why ruin a good thing? I've heard people say, when in doubt, throttle out. If at first you don't succeed, try again. Well, I've also heard the one from successful people, if at first you succeed, stop trying. I had a good thing and I didn't want to blow it, even though it needs a water pump and needs some upgraded electrical system. That's why I got this car, because this car runs and drives completely fine, totally sano. Mechanically, it is aligned. It doesn't have any issues with the bent frame. The bent frame is actually past all the suspension and anything that's going to ruin the characteristics of its chassis. So it's a safe car. It's got a very stout electrical system, a very tough motor. Maybe not a bunch of horsepower, but reliability is a lot more important, and fuel economy if the world were to end. All the electronics would be completely destroyed if we had an EMP, which is electromagnetic pulse, which is why pre-70s era cars are the ones to pick for the end of the world. But hey, we're just playing. So he said, hey, let's go get this Bronco I saw, and we went and picked it up. I bought it because I had some extra money, and I really wanted this to happen for him, and I'm glad I did, because when you see his Bronco, let me just say this. I'm talking a lot about this car. I may have blown a little bit of smoke, and I really like Charlotte, but that Bronco, it's going to be something. It looks pretty badass already. So I got the opportunity to bring this stepchild back into the family. Got Charlotte over there, which looks like, she's beaten so bad she looks like a redheaded stepchild, and this car's got the redheaded cover on the engine, so it's just as well. And I'm going to drive it, and I'm going to enjoy it, and I'm going to take it out to every event I can. Car show, drift competition, rallycross, autocross. I might not demo cross it, but I'm going to have fun with it, and I think everybody that sees it is going to enjoy it, and the people that don't enjoy it, well, they can go take a long walk off a short pier, because this is one of the things on my bucket list, to have and drive and own a street legal post-apocalyptic car. And what's really kind of cheating was when we were out there in the dust and the wind and the weather and the whatever crap is in that sand out there. I swear there's magnesium and aluminum powder in the sand out there from being so close to the Air Force Base, which might be part of what was my demise when he came back, because I ended up with a flu, and I was coughing up stuff you don't even want to talk about in a sushi restaurant. So but I'm happy. I'm gonna make her my own again. Gonna change some stuff around. I already got all the cool accessories that you can only get after the world's over, and then you can take it to the mechanic nearby that's got a whole bunch of stuff. He doesn't know how he got it, but he's got it. You know what I mean? And this is one of the last of the V8 Interceptors. It'd be a shame to blow it up.